My name is Sarah Bowen Savant. I'm an associate professor at the AKUISMC, and I teach early Islamic history in our MA program. We've just received money from the ERC to study the reuse of texts from the period of 700 to 1500. And we'll use this to hire a team of researchers, 3 different postdoctoral fellows, as well as a senior research fellow. We have a technical lead that'll be starting on the project, which is very exciting. We've spent the last, since 2013, working in a volunteer group. Now we'll have sort of a professional leading on the technical side. We will also have a research associate, and we'll be doing a lot of contract works for doing data visualization and a couple conferences actually, to study the way in which texts were used over a very long period of time. The term KITAB stands for Knowledge, Information, Technology in the Arabic Book. And we came up with this as a handy reference to the project because it also means book in Arabic. Well, the idea first came to me because as, for students, we measure plagiarism. This is what all universities do with software. And in running student papers through Turnitin, it occurred to me one day that perhaps we could use this software to actually measure and detect reuse or the copying of passages within the Arabic tradition. And we have so many texts that are online now in open access formats. So I tried for a few years to get Turnitin to develop an application that we could use, but I really got nowhere. And then I met a colleague, Maxime Romanov, and also the Perseus Digital Library, Greg Crane, and we began to work on this as an idea. So since about 2013-14, we've been working on this project, and the main aim really is to chart the diffusion of texts from the earliest days of the written Arabic tradition, let's say in the 8th century, up until the 15th or 16th centuries, and to chart them both in terms of what gets reused over time and also the networks through which they passed. And this very simple algorithm, which just detects common passages between 2 books, can be applied to all of the texts that we have, and there's thousands of these. So it's a very simple idea in a way, but I think it's quite powerful. And when we've worked on it, we've seen how we can do a lot with just this starting idea. So what the algorithm does is it aligns different passages of texts. And then once you have the data aligning passages from 2 books, you can obtain it for all the books in the corpus and all of the different relationships. And on this basis, we can see the whole networks through which texts passed. So for example, if you have a text from the 7th century, you can see it copied and recopied over many centuries. And once you combine that with the geography and also with metadata indicating dates, you can start to piece together the way in which the entirety of the Arabic tradition in its written form developed over a very long period of time in wide geography. One really important thing that the algorithm can help us to do is to trace the origins of texts that we don't have anymore. So we can find witnesses to lost texts from the early tradition. We're working on this, for example, with the Sirah, with the Prophet's biography, and we're trying to trace back to the earliest sources witnesses to a text that we have in many forms, but not in a single book as such. So there's a lot of different applications that the algorithm can be used for that I think will have relevance. One of the really important aspects of this project for the public is that it's being developed on an open access basis. And for the ERC, we've signed the Open Data Pilot Project Agreement, which is an enormous ask and experimental, but requires that we file absolutely everything on a public access basis. So we're filing our code, we're filing the data that results from the code, we're filing the book files, and all of this is already available in its basic form now on GitHub, a developer's platform. So this will enable other projects to reuse our code, to access our data, so scholars can make their own conclusions. And it also enables people to reuse all of this to create new projects, for example, on other types of literature, other historical traditions. Maxime Romanov, a member of the team, has collected thousands of books on GitHub in open access format. These have assigned URIs, and then they can now be used to feed into the algorithm for us to judge the connections, the intertextuality within the tradition. We first tried to win an ERC grant, a European Research Council grant, in 2014. And we were unsuccessful. We tried 2 more times in 2016. And then finally, at the end of December 2017, we secured the grant. And it's for 1.9, almost 2 million euros, and it runs for 5 years. And it's going to really change the project. We can hire now 3 postdoctoral fellows to do historical research based upon our data. We'll be hiring a senior research fellow, and we've just hired a digital lead who will be starting May 1st when the project itself begins. So in 2014, I presented KITAB to an advisory board for the university, and at that point, Feroz, the president of the university, heard the presentation and he said, well, wait, why don't you go and get help from the TKN? I did, subsequently, and I obtained the support of 2 fantastic developers who have been absolutely important in developing this project, along with a 3rd who joined shortly after. So the project really, from the very beginnings, was built up by volunteers, and I'm enormously grateful for their support. I was actually trained in early Islamic history, and I spent a lot of time working on philology and Arabic and Persian. I studied Sanskrit. I did work as an historian on original sources in these languages. I also had a lot of theory and method in the study of history. I wrote a book dealing with memory in early Islam, specifically with regards to Iran. So in a way, this project for me was about trying to get a handle on the textual realities that lie underneath the sources that I was reading. I mean, the books that we look at today are very much finished products. What I was curious to know is what could have been transmitted and how mechanically it was over time. So this project helps me to get sort of at the underside, I think, the material dimension in a way of transmission. I combine this work on the using the algorithms and the technical method actually with more work than I've ever done before on manuscripts. Because once you start to think about this kind of data, it becomes clear that you want to think about matters such as codicology, the way books were bound together. They're related intimately, these issues.